Okay, so for tonight, we're going to talk about how we can heal anything at any time. Now, I know this is a bold statement, especially if you're listening and you're someone who's been struggling with some kind of dis-ease or malaise for a very long time. Perhaps you have a chronic condition, and you've got something that is physically challenging, or perhaps you're struggling with your emotions, or even just some destructive thoughts or mindset shifts that need to happen. Whatever it is you're struggling with, again, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, we can heal any time. Okay. Now, there's a series of things that I would recommend if you're healing something physical, for example. So let me just create a context around this. So usually by the time something affects us physically, we have missed a cue. On a spiritual level, we step out of alignment, right? And then on a mental level, we start to create destructive thoughts. Okay. So when I say on a spiritual level, we step out of alignment. As human beings, we come into this human experience and we're not necessarily spiritually attuned, right? This is something that we need to nurture and foster and remain connected to. Oftentimes, our early childhood caregiver environments will disconnect us from our, experience of our essence, right? Of our experience of source consciousness, because we learn fear, right? We learn how to behave in the world in this 3D reality. And so spiritually, so many of us struggle with not necessarily feeling connected to source consciousness, to, our wholeness. Okay, so this is very important because healing is not about fixing something. Okay, you are never broken. It's about remembering that you're whole, right? And this is a different mindset. Even just that mindset shift, you can feel the energy in that statement. I'm not sick or I'm not unwell. I'm actually whole, and I don't remember that I'm whole. I need to remember that I'm whole. And as we start to relate to ourselves as whole, perfect, and complete in every way, we start to initiate the healing process on a mental, emotional, and physical level in our bodies. Okay, so once we're out of alignment spiritually, disconnected spiritually, we're not connected to our essence, to our wholeness, as I'm discussing tonight, which is very, very common. Okay, we start to now experience the thinking process, the mental parts of us that will keep us stuck in these feelings of disease or malaise, as I'm describing. Okay, so we start to have destructive thoughts like, oh, I am this, or I can't do that, or I have this, or this is, this is always happens to me, or I'm just stuck with it, or I was born this way, or this is just the way it is for me, or I inherited it, or there is scientific proof that shows X, Y, Z, right? The medical community and all of its science, for all of its benefits, have also served to create some conditioning and some fear around our beliefs around what we can heal and what we cannot heal, right? What's a diagnosis, right? A diagnosis, when someone gives you a diagnosis, you believe the diagnosis based on the credibility of who's giving that to you. And then as we believe the diagnosis, we start to create this reality in our bodies, right? And it can be a very controversial subject, especially if you really believe in science and the evidence of science. And to participate in these beliefs fully means that you're also co-creating this reality in your body. You have another choice. We are always in choice. We can negate a diagnosis and choose to create a different reality. It just takes a lot of discipline and a lot of practice in terms of rewiring our brains, our belief system, and doing the things that we need to do on a physical level to maintain our physical health, to come out of this consciousness, this fear-based consciousness that says, oh, I have this condition or I have this disease, and move into a state of healing, right? Move into a state of I am, relating to myself as well, right? All the cells in my body are regenerating themselves. I am creating perfect health in my body. These are good affirmations for you if you are rewiring your brain in order to create healing in your body. Okay, so as I mentioned, we are disconnected. Most of us are disconnected spiritually, and then we start to have the destructive thinking and the fear-based thoughts around conditions and diagnosis and labels and limitations that are created as a result of those. Okay, and so our thoughts now start to create this reality in our bodies, and then the emotions kick in. the fear kicks in and the pain kicks in and the sadness kicks in and the isolation or whatever feelings are being conjured up as a result of the condition that you've been struggling with, whether it's something new or something that's a prolonged experience in your life. We start to have feelings about it, right? And so the belief and the emotions create this sort of reinforcement, right? So my belief creates the feeling triggers the belief, and they reinforce each other. And now I have this momentum happening on a physical level that tells me I have this illness or that illness, or this is the diagnosis based on the physical symptoms, right? But the body is expressing your beliefs. It's expressing your unresolved emotions, and it's trying to find a way to heal itself. Okay, so when the body presents illness or it presents disease, it's actually fighting for a way to heal itself, right? It's fighting against the environment, and whether that's a physical environment or a mental environment or an emotional environment, and all of the above. Okay, so this is so important because, especially if you go to like hospitals or clinics or things like that, and you notice that there's a lot of, unwell people there is a certain energy around being in that environment that you start to participate in this consciousness of being unwell and participating in the truth of being unwell. Okay, so this is something that I want you to maintain and be vigilant about if you're dealing with a chronic condition. Okay, so obviously I'm not a medical doctor, so I cannot give a diagnosis and I cannot give a prescription for what it is that you're going through, but I can tell you from a spiritual, energetic perspective, what you can do to start to come out of dis-ease and come out of chronic ailments and chronic conditions, whether they're physical, mental, or emotional. Okay, the first thing we need to do is to examine, the situation. Okay, so I want to be responsible for myself on a physical level. So making sure that you're taking care of your body, you're eating well, you're staying hydrated, you're getting good sleep, you're doing the basic things that you need in order to maintain optimal physical wellness. Okay, so the vessel is clear, and it's for the most part pure, right? I want to say pure because I say for the most part because we live in a society that's full of pollutants and electromagnetic field and all these other things that we are sensitive to, whether we're conscious of it or not. So maintaining the physical vessel, doing our best to maintain that. And if you live in a busy city with lots of concrete and lots of like I said, electromagnetic field, you might want to spend a lot of prolonged periods of time in nature just to be able to recalibrate your cells to the natural rhythms of the earth, to fresh air, to the ocean, to the things that really do us well on a physical level. Okay, so making sure that we're doing that. And these are very basic things that so many of us take for granted because we lead busy lives, right? We go to work, we maintain our responsibilities, we do, perhaps we have children, perhaps we have, the pressure of performing and producing. And so we don't make the time necessarily to tend to our bodies, right? And so it's very important that we start to get very interested in our physical well-being and how we're maintaining our physical health. So just doing some very basic things. The next thing we want to look at, once the physical symptoms are stable, okay, we want to be able to look at our beliefs and the feelings that are associated with these beliefs. Okay, you have a belief that's connected to an emotion, and that emotion is reinforcing that belief. As I mentioned earlier, they work together to create momentum, right? So if I have a belief that I'll use a benign example. I can say that I have trouble sleeping, right? And I said that for years. I have trouble sleeping. I struggle with insomnia. I created that label with my dialogue for so many years. I created this very limited reality for myself because this is what I was putting out into the universe, and I believed it. And so I would struggle with sleep because I was declaring this on a regular basis. And of course I would be tired, and that tiredness would create, a series of uncomfortable emotions, right? And so these create momentum and they create the consistent reality. It wasn't until I started rewiring my subconscious and by creating new beliefs and engaging in practices where introducing new beliefs into your subconscious mind are relatively easy. For example, I talk about listening to affirmations before you go to sleep at night, right? So when you're in theta wave brain state, which is a state we drift into just before we go into delta, just before we go into sleep, listening to positive affirmations during that time will help bring your unconscious mind in alignment with what you consciously desire. So it'll actually rewire your subconscious, and it will start to help the sleep process. And I started with a very basic affirmation. I fall asleep easily and deeply and wake up refreshed every morning, right? And so I started with that, and it took time, and I had to really practice this belief throughout the day and then listening to it at night. And then I started to see a change in my sleeping patterns, right? I started to be less concerned about not sleeping and more interested in seeing if I could actually fall asleep, right? And I came out of this sort of trap, this mental trap I had created for myself, and started to come online with my sleeping, and started to feel better as a result of it, right? And I have literally, I can talk for hours about the list of examples I have around how I healed certain ailments in my body, whether it was, digestive things, or stomach ulcers, or tooth issues, or inflammation in my joints, and so on. So many things that I healed over the years as a result of just paying attention to my spiritual practice, paying attention to my beliefs, and paying attention. I'm not sure what's going on here. Hi, Darius. There we go. Sorry for the interruption. So paying attention to my beliefs, paying attention to my spiritual practice, paying attention to my feelings, and then really taking a good look at what I wanted to manifest in my life, how I wanted to feel in my everyday well-being. Okay, so if you're someone who's struggling with disease, or you're struggling with discomfort, or you're struggling with some kind of ailment or some kind of persistent complaint, there is a story that you're telling yourself about this persistent complaint, and I want you to take some time tonight to really examine what that story is. Is this something that you're continuously creating in the future, right? This is current day, present moment. This is always the way it is. This is always, what it's going to be like. So changing the dialogue and really examining some of the unresolved issues. The fact is that we can be unconsciously identified with our pain. It becomes part of our identity, in other words. So being someone who struggles with sleep issues, for example, was part of my identity, right? And so, just like going out and buying sleep remedies became part of my practice, or looking for the right sleep remedy became something I became fixated on, right? And so if you're watching and you can relate to this can apply to so many different things. Think about some of the things that you've struggled with in your life, and how you've made fixing the problem the focus, rather than sitting with the remembrance that you're whole, and trying to engage in that level of consciousness, so that you can see very clearly, oh, I'm participating in this thought that's creating this feeling, that's creating the physical symptom. Then the physical symptom is your body loves you. Your body is showing you the evidence of, hey, you are engaging in this thought pattern, or this self-destructive behavior, and it's hurting us, right? Like, I'm showing you that this is like something that you need to take a deeper look into, so that you can learn to heal, right? So that you can face it. And of course, there are physical symptoms that are specifically connected to a negative belief that you have, to a stuck emotion that you have, that can also be linked to an early childhood experience, right? And so, we are there when we look at universal intelligence, and we look at how divinely orchestrated it is, in terms of how it's always guiding us into our greatest expression. Even your ailments are an invitation to go deeper in your body, to experience the truth of your essence, so that you can heal, so that you can connect to love, so that you can connect to your highest expression, and you can realize yourself. That's what we're all here to do, right? So even the physical symptom can be a small thing. It can be a very, life or death situation, regardless of the severity of it. Usually the severity is in direct proportion to your need for awakening, for personal responsibility, and to learn how to truly heal these aspects of your life, right? And so when we start to challenge our beliefs, and we start to process the emotions that are associated with these beliefs, so we can come out of this old identity, and step into a new way of operating, so we can create new physical symptoms, we start to open up to our spiritual nature, right? We start to realize, oh, I am whole and complete. I was able to fully heal myself. I was able to fully come online and realize that there's nothing wrong with me. I was never broken, right? And this is such a beautiful, beautiful experience, one that I've had many times in my journey, as a human and as a healer as well. And one that I wish for you as well. So basic practical steps, and we're going to jump into questions here in a moment. I can see we have lots of people joining us tonight. Hello, hello. So just basic practical steps is identifying your condition, whatever that condition is. Okay. Noticing that this condition is part of your identity, right? Are you willing to disidentify with the condition? Are you willing to step away from this identity so that you can be free of it? Which means, there is no more complaining about it. There's no more victim about it. There's no more, I can't do this or I can't do that. Like we have to let go of that whole story that we are disempowered, right? Which, for some of us, we lean into that because it's comfortable and it's what we know, right? And this can be true for so many areas of our life, but we're talking about healing ourselves tonight. Or healing a specific condition. So am I willing to disidentify with the issue and let go of the part of me that needs to feel this way or that needs to identify with this condition? Am I willing to let this go and create a new identity? This takes willingness, awareness, and courage. If you are, then we have to now challenge the beliefs around this. When did I start believing this about myself? When did this started to come about, right? When did these issues start to present themselves? Going back and looking at perhaps your childhood or your, early teens and so on, when symptoms started to show up, or when beliefs started to show up, rather, because the beliefs will always come before the symptoms. This is so important, okay? Usually we have a belief that's created as a result of an event or a situation, or perhaps something that you inherited or something that you heard that's been said over and over again in your environment. And that belief is now creating the reality of that in your body. Okay. And so looking at those beliefs and then looking at the emotions that are connected to it, it's always fear, right? Just spoiler alert, that the root of all of human suffering is being trapped in fear-based consciousness, right? The fear of being sick and the fear of being well, the fear of failing and the fear of succeeding, the fear of being hurt and the fear of being overly joyful, right? We're afraid to experience ourselves fully because we're either afraid of good things being taken away or being abandoned, or whatever the story was that you were raised with in your early childhood environment. Okay. So again, looking at your beliefs is so important because they really affect every cell in your body. I'm going to tell you a quick story and then we'll move on to some questions. Okay. So I went to, was going for a routine dental checkup. This is a couple months ago. And I went in and they did a cleaning and they said, oh, you have an abscess and we need an x-ray. And then one thing led to another and I needed an emergency root canal. And I didn't even know what was going on. I had no pain. I was just like, okay, sure. Yes to the doctor. Yes to the doctor. Yes to the doctor. And so, after the end of the procedure, it turns out that I had this huge infection that I didn't know I was carrying in my body, and it had deteriorated some part of the bone in my jaw. And it was just this big thing. Now it was like I was looking at a potential extraction, and we don't know if the root canal is going to work. And, I don't want to bore you with the medical details, but, the diagnosis was a surprise. It was heavy. And it was, if I didn't have the awareness that I have, I would have subscribed to it. And I would have said, okay, everything you're telling me is true. And I have to do all the things that you're suggesting in order to heal my jaw and maybe eventually get a replacement tooth and all that stuff. So I walked away from this appointment and I was like, okay, I know exactly what I need to do. And I started to work on healing my jaw. I started talking to my jaw. I started talking to my tooth. I started, creating the new beliefs in my body. I started meditating and breathing and sending it love and just practicing perfect health and just visualizing every cell working to regenerate itself in this area of my body. It's amazing how magical this is with pure intention and pure energy. Right? Pure energy. And again, you got to be clear to do this work, right? So making sure you have a sound mind, sound body, your instrument is clear so that you can fully, engage in these practices consciously, really going to work on it. Make a long story short, of course, you probably already figured out the ending. I went to the dentist a few weeks later and he was like, what did you do? Like, what did you do? Like, because we took another x-ray and everything was back to normal. My bone, everything was, it looked like nothing had ever happened. Right. So it looked like the root canal they did was fine. Everything took well and there was no issue. Right. Even the bone had reappeared. So the dentist says, I'm scared of you. And of course I start to have this, we chuckle and I make light of it. And then I start to explain the power of the unconscious mind, the power of intention, and how we can heal certain parts of our bodies just by believing that we can. And what it literally took was not falling for the tidal wave, the tsunami of fear, right? That comes our way when we get these diagnoses, when we get the news about something potentially being wrong or unhealthy or sick in our bodies, right? And so being able to transcend that and stay above that wave and stay in the awareness of I'm already whole. I'm already whole. My body is whole. I just need to remember that it's whole is what helped me come out of this, dental situation, which I wasn't really that concerned about. This is not a life or death situation, but it was a good opportunity for me to practice these tools and to practice some intentional healing, and then I can tell you the story about it. So again, we want to look at our beliefs, we want to look at our energy, our intention, we want to look at our emotions, and most importantly, you want to look at your identity. Like how much of whatever it is you're struggling with is part of your identity, and how can you disidentify with that? You don't have to be a person who suffers from X. You don't have to be a person who struggles with this. It doesn't have to go that way for you. You can be a person who has perfect health in your body by practicing the tools that I've shared with you this evening. Okay. So I hope that was helpful.